Welcome to week 63 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We finished episode 306, which originally aired Monday, October 7th, 1985. Now this, as I said, will be a short week. One of the days of the week will be missing. A banker brings Warren a withdrawal slip for $10,000 with Brick's signature on it. Julia later compares the signature with a microscope. No. With a magnifying glass. And she feels it does match Brick's signature. Warren says he's sure Lionel and Augusta must have approved it, but will call them in Paris to check on it. And when he calls the hotel in Paris, they just checked out. So, I guess Augusta's plan is going forward without her, as she set it in motion to be sort of automated.
Yeah, and I guess, this kind of prolongs it a little bit because when they finally do reach them, they'll say, oh no, we never approved that, and Brick will be in hot water, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But, the longer they miss them in hotels, the longer that moment will take to come.
Mm-hmm. And gives Warren something to do.
It does. I would think the dates would be a little bit suspicious if it looks like he signed them while he was drugged up in hospital, but I'm sure there'll be ways of checking on it, and maybe this will bring things to a head with Minx in one way or another, and I think if it backfires on Augusta, it'll bring some things to a head with her as well.
Mm-hmm. It's nice to see a scene between Warren and his Aunt Julia.
It is. I like those scenes.
Two men claiming to be from the State Department, although, considering someone's after Dylan, I don't know how trustworthy that is, show up at Nick's place and ask if he's seen Dylan. And Nick says he hasn't heard from Dylan for like a year, something like that. Then they show him a picture of Janice, and he covers for her. He says, oh yeah, this lady came by about a week ago looking for Dylan. I haven't seen her since. But just then Janice, in her chauffeur's outfit, comes around the corner. Spots the men, but before she can run, they see her. So they chase her all the way to the Lockridge house, where she runs inside and begs Warren not to give her away. So the men do show up at the door, and Warren tells them that he hasn't seen Janice.
So this could be another doomed relationship for Warren, potentially.
Yeah.
A little love triangle, maybe even between Warren and Dylan and Janice, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. And as Nick is looking at the Polaroid given to him by one of the men, we see Dylan for the first time in the Polaroid, and then they do a special effect where it zooms into the Polaroid and it becomes the scene in the cockpit of Dylan's plane. Mm-hmm. And we see, unfortunately, in our first few seconds of seeing Dylan, both engines of his plane conk out, and he luckily is able to glide. Mm-hmm. And he says, I just hope we can glide all the way to Santa Barbara.
And this is a little bit reminiscent, I thought, of how we first meet Eden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it kind of denotes the same reckless personality. And I think with Dylan we get, a sense that he is concerned about this, obviously, but he's a little bit excited by it too. And I think we get a little sense of his sort of adrenaline that he gets from being in danger, and that gives us a sense of his personality.
Yeah, he spends the episode talking to his plane, so we get to hear his thoughts throughout the episode as he's managing not to crash throughout the entire episode.
And actually, Dylan's look, and maybe where this storyline is going, and I'm not sure how the dates fit in, but it kind of reminded me of the Smuggler's Blues, and that whole, I remember it was very hyped when Glenn Frey was on Miami Vice playing a smuggler. And I think that's around the time they were really promoting Smuggler's Blues as well. But he had sort of the same look, sort of the scruffy little beard and the longish hair, and kind of reminded me of that.
Released 1984. So that could well be what they are going for. Miami Vice being another NBC series.
That's right.
Brick is taken to the hospital, having saved little Johnny. the doctor confirms that the fall dislodged the metal near his spine, and Brick is now out of danger. So that was the positive of the two, guesses we had.
Brick's going to be a little more mobile once he's out of hospital.
But he still tells Amy to go back to New Staland. Nick tells Amy his new theory that he just came up with, his wild theory that Minx didn't want anyone to find out that Glenn Wallace isn't Brick's real father.
And wow. I think we should be detectives, because we came up with that several weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Nick watches a lot of soap operas, because in the real world, that probably wouldn't be the first thing you think of.
No.
Cruz tells Nick that if the State Department is involved, whatever they want Dylan for must be pretty big. Nick feels that Cruz might have a better chance with them because he's still actively involved in law enforcement, even though they both have the same connections. So he kind of asks Cruz to check into it for him.
Now, I wasn't entirely sure if he was just asking Cruz to check into it, or if he was kind of asking Cruz to use his influence to, well, not make it go away, but maybe, see if he could kind of, I don't know, make it a little bit better if it's something bad.
It was a very short scene, so
yeah,
maybe we'll see. We'll see next time what it was that Cruz actually managed to do. Off screen, we find out that Mason told Eden that Cruz's words swayed the judge. Eden says that she can't go to Cece's room because that's what the machines want.
Sounds like Eden's kind of losing it a little bit when she's talking like that.
They speak to her in her dreams. I guess they're calling for her to turn them off. I feel like things aren't going to go well for Eden. And I feel like Gina's going to be involved somehow in making things not go well for Eden.
Yes, I think that's very possible. I think Kirk could play a role in that too, actually.
Kirk chats with his dad. He's at the beach bar on the telephone. Have we seen the beach bar yet this year?
It certainly has not been featured as much as it was last year.
No, not since Christy was found there. I guess that was the last time we saw that. It wasn't as fun of a place over the summer. But now it's October, so time to go to the beach. Finally. And his dad has recommended Julia, and Kirk is looking for her. She's actually sitting at a table there, but he can't really figure out which one she is. But eventually he realizes from Jack's description. And it turns out Kirk needs Julia to draw up a contract for him with Capwell Enterprises, because he has been working just, I guess, not on contract up until this point. And Julia is acting very Augusta-like in these scenes.
She even sounds like her.
I mean, yeah, it was pretty amazing what Nancy Grahn was doing there. So that was kind of fun. She clearly is trying to entice Kirk Cranston, putting her legs up on the table and stretching in front of him while he's going over the documents.
She reminded me a lot of actually the first time we ever met Augusta, which I think is in the very first episode. And the first time we see her as this hand dramatically coming out with these long red fingernails, and just the way she was moving, and Julia reminded me a lot of that.
Julia also mentions that she saw Kirk's photo in the paper and that it looked like he and Eden made a nice couple. So she has even picked up on something that Cruz is probably afraid of, that Kirk and Eden are being associated with, as a couple by other people as well, I guess, if they're going to be hanging out a lot together.
Now, do we know exactly what Kirk does? Is he like a portfolio manager or something like that?
I don't know. He seems to have taken on a lot of, he's helping to run the business, right? Helping to run Capwell Enterprises.
But we know he's not a lawyer, because he actually emphasizes that a few times.
That's why he needs Julia to drop those papers for him. Maybe they realized they had too many lawyers and thought, if we make another lawyer, we're going to have too many. So they put a twist on the Kirk character. Eden finds out that Kirk didn't sell the stock she told him to last week, and that he also wants her to dump the first oil field that Cece ever found oil on. And Kirk, of course, tries to talk her into it by saying, well, if you sell the stock now, they're just about to make a breakthrough in some sort of, biodegradable garbage or something. I forget what the story was. It was a waste disposal company, I think, that was about to make a breakthrough. And he says, oh, that field has no oil left, and your dad would have sold it. So they have a big argument over that, during which Kirk pulls out this contract that he demands Eden sign. Mm-hmm. She looks through it and says, there's no way I'm signing this. And he, I guess, gives her an ultimatum, and she fires him. And Kirk says, who are you going to get to run this company? You and Rosa? Kirk is very snarky in this episode, quite a few times. So
yeah.
This is Kirk Cranston will come to know and love in the coming years. Already very evident. So Kirk says he's leaving, but he doesn't. He actually hangs up near the door because he sees that Eden has gone to the phone to call her broker to sell that stock. So he picks up the phone that's near the door, and after Eden gives the order to sell all that stock, Kirk says, hey, Kirk Cranston here on the other line, I'll buy all that stock she's just about to sell for the same price. Mm-hmm. So I think he feels like he could make a killing with that stock that's about to jump up. And apparently has a lot of money of his own.
Yeah, well, and we have to assume that Jack Stanfield Lee has quite a bit of money as well, I would think, since we already know he helped out his cousin. Mm-hmm, so, he might have gotten some seed money from dear old dad too, but he definitely seems to have enough money to roll with.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, Eden is not too happy about this. They kick him out again, and he leaves about 3 times in this episode. And he says that next week she'll be begging him to work for her. And, of course, both Eden and Cruz are scoffing at that. As he leaves, he says to Cruz, well, she's all yours, Lieutenant. Cruz says, that's Inspector.
And Cruz looks very sort of pleased with himself throughout this whole thing. He's kind of smiling and smirking in the background. He's finally seeing Kirk get his own. But I have a feeling that that's not gonna last for Cruz.
He was telling Eden, no, you should just fire him.
Yeah.
Because when she was complaining about him not selling the stock. So Julia, having half-finished her meeting at the beach bar, decides to go to the beach, since she was in a bathing suit all episode. And she seems to be stretching or something. She's not really jogging or swimming, as far as I can tell. But maybe she is planning to go for a swim, but she sees something in the water. And then the camera zooms in, and we see there's a man swimming to shore. I'm assuming that's Dylan Hartley.
I think so.
So Julia and Dylan is maybe another potential pairing here. There's all sorts of potential relationships with this new group of characters, Kirk, Janice, and Dylan, that have all been introduced in these last few episodes. So, exciting to see Dylan's first interaction with the Santa Barbarian will not be with his brother, so someone who's not even involved in the storyline. Yeah. And maybe we'll find out if those guys really are from the State Department, and if they are, either way, who is after Dylan.
And are there more than one group of people after Dylan? Because certainly if he's been running illegal activities, it could be the government, but it could also be whoever he has probably double-crossed. He has a little kind of gold medallion, so maybe he's smuggling out, precious objects or something.
That is it for episode 306. So we'll be back after we watch episode 307 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
She's all yours, Lieutenant.
It's Inspector.
Yeah, of course it is.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 307 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Tuesday, October 8th, 1985. Ted and Danny Yay, we haven't seen Danny in a long time. They're at the beach bar because it's October 8th. And I guess it's finally time for beach scenes on Santa Barbara.
And this was a throwback in so many ways to the first season.
Mm-hmm. Angel and his gang of two have been roughing up Danny because they're not too happy that he tried to intervene as they were beating up a kid. Angel is a new character that we'll be seeing for quite a few years on Santa Barbara.
Boy.
Yeah. And he's played by Bernard White, who is Sri Lankan. And we recently saw him as Denpak, the spiritual advisor on Silicon Valley.
Oh.
So Angel is the leader of this gang. Cruz has no luck with the State Department finding out, what's going on with Dylan Hartley. Eden says it's because he quit. Cruz says that he met Dylan about 10 years ago. So this is actually interesting. I hadn't thought of it, but Cruz actually knows Dylan. We were thinking, who'd be the first to meet Dylan of our cast? And really, Cruz already had.
And Cruz, interestingly enough, talks about Dylan as a good kid.
Mm-hmm.
So it obviously is not just, Nick's a little bit biased, but it's obviously not just Nick's opinion of him.
Mm-hmm. Dylan, meanwhile, is swimming ashore, and Julia is watching him, and he walks right up to her. Doesn't seem to be too tired after his long swim. He strides right out of the water, rather than staggering like some of us would, and grabs her towel and dries himself off with it.
And I believe it was during this scene where we got treated to the sounds of Gino Vanelli.
Ah, yes. What was it called? Something Stranger? Total Stranger. Gino Vanelli.
And that's the second time we've heard him in the last couple episodes.
And they played it several times when showing Dylan and Julia. So, do we see a new couple here, Dylan and Julia?
I wonder.
I mean, they're all going to be in the house together. Janice, Julia, Dylan will be soon. So Dylan goes to the beach bar and orders a beer, but he has no money. So he has his, lucky lump of gold, and the bartender won't take it as a down payment. So Dylan uses his techniques that he's learned in the East, I guess, to play the shell game with the 3 mugs and his lump of gold, and tries to get the people in the bar to bet him as to which mug the lump of gold will be under. Now, Julia plays first, and she wins, but of course, if anyone knows anything about how 3-card Monte works, the first person who wins is always working for the guy who's moving the cards. So in this case, Angel steps in, seeing how easy it is, and proceeds to lose one time after another. And Dylan has enough money to pay for his beer, pay Julia the $5 she won, and have a little money left over to buy himself a jar of jalapenos, which he eats straight out of the jar.
So again, a little bit of an insight into Dylan's character, a bit of a risk taker, but someone who perhaps stacks the deck in his own favor.
Because Angel, a few minutes after leaving, realizes that he really doesn't want Dylan to have his money, and comes back and says that he cheated. And Dylan immediately takes a fighting stance and basically knocks down one of the 3 guys who's approaching him, and Angel and the other guy run away. So.
And it should be noted, although Dylan is obviously very fit, like Cruz, we see a lot of him with his shirt off. He's not actually a really big person, so obviously, again, he's willing to take some chances to get his way, I suppose. I mean, because he didn't know if Angel had a gun or a knife or something like that.
It sounds like he's been in a lot of rough scrapes in Africa, and probably has lots of ways of dealing with different types, including, hopefully, whoever's after him. Julia gets into her car. She's got a little convertible Volkswagen, it looked like, or something of that nature. And she finds Dylan in the back seat. And he says, oh, just drop me off at any cheap motel. So she agrees to do that, and he pretends he's fallen asleep so that she can't argue with him too much more. When they get to a cheap motel, he says, can you just do me one more favor and just check me in under your name? So he obviously doesn't want people to know he's there, and she shows him the room. He tries to get her to stay. Of course, she's not interested, but he also manages to steal her purse and grab her wallet. So even though she's given him a fake name, and he thinks he's given her Dylan as a single name, which she assumes is his last name, he actually does get her real name from her ID, and presumably the address at the Lockridge Mansion, where I imagine he'll be showing up tomorrow.
I imagine he will, and yes, another little bit of sleight of hand from Dylan.
Mm-hmm. The artful Dylan. At one point, the State Department guys, or one of them, shows up at the front desk, asking if he's seen Dylan, so it's a good thing that Julia did the checking in. Gina is annoyed that Mason helped Sophia get off. She says, I was kind of hoping she'd be tucked away in jail for a while. Mason doesn't have much luck getting another date with Mary because she says she's got to work at the clinic. So he decides, I'll just show up at the clinic and volunteer. But who else is volunteering when Mason shows up but two of Ginger's girls, Jerry and Dawn. And they both recognize Mason and greet him heartily. And Mason has to explain that he did some legal work for Ginger. So then he has to talk Mary into letting him help, and she doesn't think he could be very useful. But he says, people find me very helpful. And Mary says, people like Dawn, Jerry, and Ginger?
And I have to admit, I'm rather pleased that Ginger is still around. We don't see her. She's off in the background somewhere. She's vanquished, I want to say Antonio, but she's vanquished Peter. And, I kind of like the fact we may never see her again, but I like the fact that she's still around.
And we see Mason, helping Mary treat an old man, and Mary's pretty impressed with his skill. Then Danny comes in injured from, I believe, a second fight with Angel, because he wasn't that badly hurt before, so he was just being chased at the beginning. So Danny and Ted come in, and then Angel shows up as well, and Mason manages to trick him into leaving by saying that as soon as Danny came in, they had called the police. So Angel leaves, but now he's on the bad side of Mary and Mason, or vice versa. Mary, Mason, and the clinic are on his bad side.
And I think Mason actually got rough with him a little bit too, didn't he?
He may have gotten quite close to him, maybe grabbed him by the collar.
But I remember thinking, watching this scene, that Mason seemed to have been a little bit tougher, maybe because Mary was there and he was trying to impress her. But if you remember his attempts to get Hank Judson out of that bar, quite a long time ago, it was not successful at all.
No. Maybe he's taken some lessons. Angel and one of his thugs wear black leather jackets, and his other gang member wears a brown leather jacket. So I don't know if that's just a wardrobe deficiency, or if the gang is quite lax on the dress code, or if it's a loose affiliation of
key is
thugs.
The leather jacket. That's how you know.
So you know they're in a gang. So Ted, of course, immediately calls Cruz and gets him down there. And then Danny tells Cruz that his neighborhood is overrun by Angel and his gang, and that they had all been kind of hoping that Inspector Castillo would have done something about this by now. So that's an interesting actually thought, that there may be neighborhoods in Santa Barbara where the police don't, show up as quickly as if you're a Lockridge or a Capwell. And one tends to think of this being L.A., but maybe Santa Barbara has neighborhoods like that too, or did in the 80s. And Cruz says, well, unfortunately, I'm no longer with the police.
I think this will be another source of pressure on Cruz to get back with the police, or at least a source of guilt that he's not with the police. Another sore spot, I suppose, with him quitting his job. And, it does hint to me that we've seen it all in the context of him in Eden, but him being on the force probably was a huge asset to the force and the community, because there probably weren't a lot of Latin police officers on the force. And Danny's kind of bringing that up and alluding to it in a way that perhaps Cruz, maybe not just as a tough guy, but he could kind of maybe speak the language of some of the folks, like kind of reach them a bit better, and maybe as a role model as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope they actually pursue this a little bit.
Yeah.
The role of Cece Capwell is today being played by a dummy,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, because neither Charles Bateman nor Justin Witness, who, will be playing him at one point in his bed, was in the credits. And the first we saw of him was his hand, which Sophia was holding. I thought, wow, that looks really pale, like a really light plastic, made to look like a human white person's hand. And then the face actually tricked me for a second, because I thought it could be Charles Bateman, but it was either wood or plastic, I guess, and maybe the skin was a bit shiny. But yeah, I actually had to look it up to confirm that Charles Bateman actually wasn't in the episode. So they've got a good dummy there.
Yeah.
So they may need Charles Bateman and Justin Witness to shift or something in future episodes, and that's why they can't rely on the dummy completely until either Cece dies or comes out of it. Sophia tells Cece about her suspended sentence. Eden shows up and is freaked out by the machines, and she tells Sophia about her dream. And then Gina says to Sophia that Cece was only letting her stay at the mansion through to the end of her trial, and since there won't be a trial, she should leave now. She says, why don't you go to Europe or somewhere else where older women are appreciated? And Sophia says, I'm not leaving until the day you do. So they're both ensconced in there until Cece wakes up and chases them both out. Gina asks the night nurse, I guess, the non-Mary nurse, what would happen if one of the machines malfunctioned? She makes a reference to that time a few weeks ago during the thunderstorm when the machines went off, and the nurse says that her beeper would go off, which is, we did hear a beeper sound yesterday when they had that incident, and it wasn't really explained yesterday that it was a beeper going off. But yeah, the nurse is carrying a beeper now, probably after that first incident, and she says, yeah, I would get the beeper will go off as soon as something goes wrong with the machines. So to test it out, Gina waits till Eden and the nurse are down in the atrium and then crimps the air hoses, and she has a stopwatch, and she times to see exactly how long it takes the nurse to get up to Cece. And she actually says to Cece, I bet you're a bit confused, but you'll find out what I'm planning soon enough.
I think she's planning to set up Eden in some way, possibly, when knowing the time it would take. Now, another possibility is if she actually does want to try and kill Cece, I could see the nurse's beeper mysteriously running out of batteries or something like that as well. But I feel like she would gain more by getting Eden out of the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I'm thinking she's benefiting from Cece being in the coma. So if she can somehow combine something to make Eden look bad, but yet still keep Cece in the coma, like keep him from dying.
Yeah.
So maybe that's it. Maybe she's got a very precariously timed plan. Which, will it succeed or fail? At the beach bar, Eden asks Cruz to go for a swim. Somewhat sensuously, because the bartender's watching, somewhat embarrassed at this exchange. And he says he's...
No, and I was just going to say, and remember, it is October.
Oh, that's right. It's October. And Cruz says he's still a little handicapped in the leg department, so more references to his injury. So she just invites him to watch her swim, which the bartender grins at. And then, over the montage of Cruz and Eden having fun in the sand, we hear Huey Lewis and the News, The Power of Love, from the movie Back to the Future. Now, Back to the Future was released July 3rd, 1985, so it's just over 3 months in the theaters now at this point. And the actual movie takes place on October 21st, 1985, so it's about 2 weeks before the actual time the movie would take place.
I think that we're seeing in this show that, the show is really trading on the idea of California being this sort of paradise almost. But if you've ever been to California, it's actually not warm throughout the year. Probably nowadays, in October, it would be covered in smoke and fires. But even if that weren't the case, perhaps not in October, but into the winter and that, it can actually get quite cold. So it'll be interesting to see if we see a lot of frolicking beach scenes, I don't know, December, February, like that.
Mm-hmm. That is it for episode 307. So we will be back after we watch episode 308. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
I was kind of hoping she'd be tucked safely away in jail for a little while.
Welcome back! It's Wednesday, October 9th, 1985, and thanks to baseball playoffs, Santa Barbara is preempted today. But if you were watching soap operas on October 9th, 1985, you would have seen Another World, as expected, and you would have also seen Days of Our Lives. And I was going to show Diane a clip from Days of Our Lives, but the episode that was once on YouTube has been pulled. So I was hoping we could watch that whole episode. So instead, I found a wiki entry on a Days of Our Lives site that has a single still photo from that episode.
Ah.
On October 9th, 1985, episode 5073 of Days of Our Lives, Missy Brennan, slightly 2 months after leaving Santa Barbara, is taken on the role of Jennifer Rose Horton on Days of Our Lives. A role that 35 years later she's still portraying.
Yeah. And I have to say that nixes my hopes that I would see her and Danny again.
Mm-hmm.
I assume, but
Yep.
Impressive.
Yep. So that's it for Wednesday, but we'll be back Thursday after we watch episode 308 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
I feel like Frankenstein or one of those other mythical monsters.
Well, the only difference is you're not mythical.
Gina, you've changed your opinion of me.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 308 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, October 10th, 1985. Mary mentions the ladies of the evening that were chummy with Mason to Gina, and Gina tells her that she should be worried about Mason's past. Gina says Mary's not the right woman for Mason. She says, for you, it would be tragic, but for another woman, he could be perfect. Of course, I don't know who she is. What a lucky woman she is. So this, I think, gives Mary the idea that Gina is interested in Mason.
Mm-hmm.
Julia returns to Dylan's room to retrieve her stolen address book. I don't know why I said it was her wallet yesterday, because we knew it was her address book. So, he, in turn, asks her to send his brother, Nick Hartley, to see him.
Mm-hmm.
He makes it clear it's not really safe for him to go out in public. She does not let on that she knows Nick Hartley. Cruz tells Nick that Dylan's plane crashed off the coast and he's presumed dead. So Nick tells Cruz that he's going to head to the beach. Julia shows up and asks Cruz if he knows where Nick is. And Nick says, well, his brother's, crashed and he's headed to the beach. So Julia says, I might just have some good news for him. So we do not see Julia go to Dylan, but presumably that did happen. Then we hear the love theme from St. Elmo's Fire as Nick wanders the beach, contemplating the loss of his brother, and finds his brother's jacket, which Nick had originally sent him from Vietnam.
And I believe this is an anniversary of St. Elmo's Fire, is it not?
Ah, that's right, 1985.
Yeah.
So Dylan pops up behind Nick and starts talking to him. And of course, Nick's happy that he's alive and tells him he's happy to get his jacket back. I've worn it every day since you sent it to me from Nam. And then, of course, Nick has to bring up the fact that Dylan's been lying to him for the last 4 years. And he says, Nick tells Dylan that he's disappointed Mom and Dad by not becoming a doctor. So this is the first we've heard about other Hartley family members. Maybe we'll see them someday. But Dylan counters with Nick disappointing their parents when he didn't become a lawyer and decided to become a photographer. So then Nick mentions that some guys from the State Department had been looking for him, and Dylan says that as far as he knows, he's not in trouble with the State Department. But there is one man that is after him.
Oh, maybe we'll get to meet another villain.
You could call him an independent contractor. First, he'll try to get some information out of me. When that doesn't work, he'll probably kill me. And this comes up in the context of the gold nugget, which Dylan gives Nick as sort of a down payment to start paying him back for the money. And that's what leads Nick to ask if this is something to do with the trouble that he's in.
I was pleasantly surprised that this wasn't really drawn out for a long time. I sort of was almost expecting Dylan to miss Nick somehow and Nick to be mourning Dylan, and I almost thought that reunion between the two of them could go on for a week or two before we actually saw it. So it was really nice to get that instant gratification.
And not showing the scene of Julia going to get Dylan. That short-circuited that story a bit. Cece is being transported to the hospital for tests. Gina listens as Mary discusses his temporary machines with someone at the hospital, I guess, on the phone. So Gina's really interested in the machinery that's keeping Cece alive. Eden walks into Cece's empty room and thinks he has died. But Gina just says, oh no, he's just gone to the hospital for tests. Then Mason shows up, and he and Gina fool around with the equipment, and Mason lies in the bed and puts the heart monitor on himself, and Gina fiddles around with the dials. And then Mason says to Gina that Cece could linger for years, and that would probably best for her if Cece died. Mason says that he's filed a motion to take over Capwell Enterprises that can't be reversed even if Cece does wake up.
Oh, that would be fun.
So, Gina says she should have married Mason instead of Cece. And then we have another fantasy sequence. Perhaps the goofiest we've had on Santa Barbara, and maybe a portent of things to come. But Gina dreams about marrying Mason, and as the officiant is marrying them, he is also simultaneously conducting a eulogy for Cece, who's lying dead next to them.
These aren't the kind of dreams one usually has as a daydream. These might be the kind you have at night, but perhaps it says something about Gina's mental state, that these are her daydreams during her consciousness.
Yes. What do you think about Mason saying to her that it would be better for her if Cece were dead? Do you think
Well,
that
I imagine
syncs up
that
with her plans?
will be a bit motivating for her. And if she can do it in a way that, well, certainly tortures and maybe even indicts Eden, that would be even better.
Mm-hmm. Mary walks in and puts an end to all of this shenanigans. She's Mason lying in the bed and playing with the equipment, so she kicks them out. And then Mary says to Mason, "You know, I think Gina might have designs on you." So Mason, of course, is still trying to hide all that from Mary. So she may be putting two and two together eventually. All it would take is for Ted or Kelly to say, "Oh yeah, Mason slept with Gina, and that's why we hate him." Eden has been contemplating Cece's situation all night, and Cruz reminds her that if she pulls the plug, it would be murder. So she goes to talk to Cece, who I believe is being played by a dummy, because Charles Bateman is not credited. No one is credited as Cece in this episode. So I feel like it's another dummy. Either that, or they glossed over it so quickly that there wasn't even anyone in the bed. That's another possibility. Rosa comes in to tell her that they should forget about all these machines and doctors. Cece would recover if they prayed very hard. This is the first, I guess, real indication that Rosa's insane, I guess. So that was unexpected from Rosa, but it's clear which side she'll be in on the plug pulling. Gina says that prayer hasn't been doing Cece much good so far, to which Rosa responds, "Maybe you've been praying for the wrong thing, Mrs. Campwell." That's actually a good dig by Rosa.
Yeah, I guess it is. I don't know. I find Rosa so, she tries to come across this sort of all-knowing matron, and I find so often for me, I just find her kind of exasperating, in her weird relationship with Santana and, with various other people in the household. I don't think she comes across quite the way she's tried to come across.
Rosa takes the opportunity to ask Cruz to do something about the situation with Danny in the barrio. Now, I think last time we talked about whether or not there is a barrio in Santa Barbara, and I did some Googling, and there seemed to be some photos. They were in black and white, but maybe there is a barrio section of Santa Barbara. Mason tells Eden that she lost over $1 million by selling that stock last week. And he says that she needs a good guiding hand to take over the company and volunteers that should be him. Eden decides she'd rather hire Kirk. Kirk has, meanwhile, in the week, I guess, with the $1 million he just made, bought a winery. That came out of nowhere, but we see a gentleman selling him a winery and, telling him, the roof doesn't need that much repairing. The wind is blowing down through the basement from the roof somehow. Eden shows up with the papers, and she's really not combative at all with Kirk today. And she has the papers to sign, to hire him on. And then he actually admits that he was just guessing about the stock, which is interesting. But the faulty tiles in the ceiling cause the wind to blow the door shut, locking Eden and Kirk into the wine cellar.
Now, I was trying to think as we were watching this, I don't really associate wines with Santa Barbara. I think all the winemaking is a little farther north in California. You think of the Napa Valley and that area around San Francisco.
Maybe that was why it wasn't a very profitable winery, and he's been trying to unload it for years.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of wine in that basement, so as Kirk and Eden contemplate their paperwork, Kirk opens up a bottle of wine. And a few hours later, Cruz decides to head for the winery because Eden is missing in action.
The love triangle continues to develop.
Yes, he probably won't be too happy to find Eden and Kirk drunk in the wine cellar. and to find out that she's hired Kirk. And we had some credits today. Everything else was the same as last time, but Dylan Hartley is listed for the first time, played by Paige Mosley. And in the not regular cast section, we had Patty, played by Ted Lehman. I can only assume Patty is the old winery owner. I don't think they actually mentioned it by name. But I don't recall any other characters in the episode. So. And that is it for today. Anything else you wanted to add?
Not really. I think it tells us just a little bit more about Kirk's character, that he went right to the edge on something that was just a guess.
Mm-hmm. If it really was. So.
If it really was.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
You'll see.
Either way, it tells us a little bit more about Kirk.
Yep. So Kirk's definitely going to be driving a wedge between Cruz and Eden today, probably. And maybe we'll find out a little more about Dylan's predicament.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting, I think, as Kirk perhaps works his way further and further into Eden's life, just to see what kind of interactions he has with other strong characters like Mason and Gina.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Julia's still interested in him, so we'll see if they have some more encounters too.
Mm-hmm.
She might show up at that winery as well.
Yeah.
We will find out after we watch episode 309 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Never underestimate the power of prayer.
Well, it hasn't worked yet. Look at him.
Maybe you've been praying for the wrong thing, Mrs. Kepler.
It's really quite easy, isn't it? Just flip the switch, and all your troubles are gone.
You are watching Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara, the world's only 100% magnetized Santa Barbara podcast. Explain that. Welcome back.
Hello.
We've finished episode 309 of Santa Barbara, the last episode of week 63. So we've had a short week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Next week will be even shorter, because baseball is still running, and we'll still have some preemptions. So that makes me wonder if they knew this was going to be a Friday episode. The ending, I wouldn't say it was cliffhangery, but it wasn't entirely boring. So Eden and Kirk, of course, are locked in the wine cellar at Kirk's new winery. They get to know each other for several hours while they're locked in there. And one of the things Kirk says while they're talking about his dad is, "Not only am I a bastard by birth, I am a cold one by breeding. I am the answer to an Iron Maiden's prayers." And Kirk, not unexpectedly to us, agrees with Eden on the subject of Cece. He says, you should, follow his wishes. So whether Kirk really cares or not, one way or the other, if Cece dies, that's a different question. But he appears to be.
Well, he knows, I think, if nothing else, he knows what way to play this with Eden.
Definitely. Yeah. Cruz finally gets the door open. Now, well, he takes a long time to get there. And gets the door open. And Eden jumps into his arms. And Kirk, in my opinion, looked a little disappointed after several hours of bonding with Eden.
But I think he's laid the groundwork in these few hours for perhaps reaping some future benefit.
Mm-hmm. Especially considering the main rift between Eden and Cruz right now is the idea of pulling the plug on Cece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mason pretends to Mary that he's barely noticed Gina in the time they've been living together. He then tells her he wants to meet her at the State Street Bistro before they start their shift at the clinic. Mary's a bit surprised that he's returning to the clinic, but she's happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
At the State Street Bistro, Mason hangs out at the bar while waiting for Mary, and who should be sitting next to him but Janice Harrison. who is also drinking because she believes that Dylan has died in a plane crash. They call the bartender Jake. Now, is that the name of the bartender that we had all those years ago? All those weeks ago? I think it was Jake, wasn't it?
Yeah, he looked different.
Did not
to
look
me.
the same.
Yeah.
Looked like a completely different actor. But either they've recast Jake, or they just call all the bartenders Jake, or two of them are named Jake. But we'll see if we see Jake more and if it's the same new guy. Janice and Mason move to a table, and she tells him she lives at the Lockridge house. And at first he seems to think maybe she's moved in before or something. But he finds out that she's the Lockridge chauffeur. And she tells him about it. She's just lost someone, and apparently starts to cry, although I didn't really see that in evidence on the set. But Mason gets out a very thick, napkin-y looking handkerchief and starts to wipe her tears just as Mary walks in and misinterprets things a little bit. But later on, Mason smooths things over by telling her that, unlike Janice, Mary is a natural beauty. Dylan tells Nick that he only needs $25,000 to get his gold mine operational. Nick thinks at first he's asking him for more money, but Dylan says, no, I have a way of getting it. So this sounds like perhaps another dodgy scheme is underway.
Yeah, we're getting a real sense of Dylan being a bit of well, I would almost say a grifter, or an idealistic grifter, perhaps, to be a bit more generous. But he's definitely someone who seems to fall for a lot of crazy, get-rich-quick kinds of exploits.
Well, we'll see how that pans out. Of course, he's being watched by those guys who may or may not be from the State Department. I think now, pretty sure they're not, because Dylan was surprised by that. But Nick realizes, Dylan spots them outside, and then Dylan spots a car outside, but then Nick later confirms it's the two guys from the State Department. So, I don't know why they're suspecting that hotel, because, after Julia checked Dylan in, they came by, and the hotel manager said no one of Dylan's description had checked in, so I'm not sure how they decided on that motel. Maybe it's closest to the beach where they last expected Dylan to be, and they think it's still the most likely place that he ended up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good possibility. And, also Santa Barbara isn't really that big, we would hardly be in a luxury hotel or something like that. And so it might just be a process of elimination that they've got a few that they think he's most likely to be at.
Nick brings Janice to the motel room, but doesn't tell her why, so that when Dylan opens the door, she is very happily surprised. And they immediately jump on the bed together. Nick barely can have time to vacate the room. So I guess they've got Janice now, meeting several of the eligible bachelors in the city, although I don't know how eligible Mason is, with already two women chasing him. But now that Mason and Janice have met, it's another potential linkage between Janice. Maybe NBC forced them to hire her, and they're just trying to see who she works well with.
Yeah, that's possible. And, unfortunately, I'd kind of hope to see a bit more fireworks between Augusta and Janice, because that would have been interesting. And of course, we know Lionel's history and everything. But of course, Augusta and Lionel are still off on their grand tour, so that's not an opportunity we have to see right now.
Yeah, I think Mason says, surely Augusta didn't hire you. And Janice says, no, she hates me. Danny comes into the clinic, bleeding from the arm. So Mary and Mason have to patch him up. Cruz arrives and asks Danny to tell him what happened. And of course it's Angel's gang that once again attacked him as retribution for last week when Danny tried to intervene. And it turns out that the guy who brought Danny into the clinic is an undercover cop that Cruz had managed to get placed with Danny. So that's interesting. This happened in between episodes. We didn't realize that earlier in the episode before Cruz showed up. But
I'm wondering if that was maybe, something obviously off camera, but remember we had that whole thing earlier on about Cruz leaving the force and how there wouldn't be someone on the force who could really relate to the Hispanic community, and maybe this was Cruz's solution to that.
Mm-hmm. Well, apparently this undercover cop immediately freaked out when the gang attacked and blew his cover and revealed himself as a cop.
Mm-hmm.
So Cruz is very angry with him because now they know that Danny is hanging out with an undercover cop, and they're going to be even more angry with him. And the cop, whose name we didn't really get, doesn't really care for the way Cruz is speaking to him. And he says, "Go to hell, Castillo!" So I don't know if he's previously had issues with Cruz or if it's just this one incident that he's really, blown his top over.
I feel like sometimes there could be a whole show around the office soap operas that go on behind the scenes. And maybe, who knows, maybe there is a whole history or something like that. But basically it is I think the emphasis is that, this guy's not going back in on account of Danny. So Danny is very much in danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's going to come to a head soon. They can't keep stabbing Danny once a week without,
Yeah, Cruz is going to, I think, be forced to intervene somehow. And maybe that will mean less time or whatever to attend to his Eden situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or Cruz may get injured himself. Eden will have to decide whether to pull the plug on Cruz. Gina is annoyed that the doctor won't talk to anyone but Eden about Cece's condition. The doctor was not named, but there is a credit in IMDb for Dr. Reston, which is seems to be his first episode. A little concerned about a doctor with a name starting with R. You always think, is he going to go crazy and try to kill Kelly? But this seems to be a non-Kelly doctor. So he'll just be probably hanging around with Marion, Eden, and Cece during his time on the show. But he tells Eden there's no hope that Cece will come out of his coma. Unless he said little hope. But it sounded like a very short syllable. I've listened to it a couple times. It sounds like no hope to me. Which I think is designed to push Eden towards, her decision a little more, from a writing standpoint.
Of course, if this was Days, the doctor would pull off a mask and end up being Kristen Demira or someone like that.
My name is Hans Reicher, and I'm the last doctor that you will ever hear. So Gina tries to press Eden for what did the doctor say, and Eden doesn't want to tell her. So Gina guesses, "Oh, I think I know. That's why you're so upset. He's even closer to death now." Meanwhile, Kirk is listening very thoughtfully nearby behind one of the few remaining pillars in the Capwell atrium.
It's amazing how easily people get in and out of the Capwell home.
Mm-hmm. They sneak around, hide behind pillars, secret stairways that only Rosa and Santana know about. Rosa went to the kitchen, either in this or the last episode. She did go towards that door at the far left, where the study, where you also go to get to the study. So I think the kitchen is definitely in that area. So maybe that mystery door right next to the front door does go to the kitchen somehow. So Kirk is now definitely, I think, in on the pulling the plug on Cece storyline now. Mm-hmm. How he will use it is interesting. I mean, it's interesting that he's now aware of this conflict between Gina and Eden. So I don't know if he'll use that in some way.
Yeah, he's a character, we saw, I guess, a couple weeks ago that when Mason and Gina were bedding each other again, and Mason thinks about how similar he and Gina are to each other, and I think Kirk kind of fits into that category too, and it would be really interesting to see him interact a bit more with Gina and Mason, because I think they all kind of have that same sort of scheming, Machiavellian
Mm-hmm.
kind of way about them.
Yeah, I think we're just getting these little glimpses into Kirk, but he seemed to. I think he did say at one point phase 1 complete or something. So I think he's got some plans for his job at Cabwell, I guess. And then as they're arguing, Gina says to Eden, "You're the one who's going to need a doctor soon, a psychiatrist." Now I'm wondering if this is part of her plan. She'll try and make. Maybe she'll drug Eden to make her seem more psychotic, so that she can frame Eden for pulling the plug on CC better or something like that.
Yeah, well, she has actually got a little bit of experience with this, because remember, she was in that clinic for quite some time. So she's kind of, I guess, gotten a bit of a sense of how this might work. She's already been involuntarily confined in that way herself, so she's certainly seen how effectively that kind of thing could get Eden out of the picture, at least for a while.
Maybe that's her plan, to get Eden locked up. Eden is she going to put on Eden's dress and pull the plug on CC and then say Eden did it and have Eden committed, so she's got two people out of her way? We haven't talked about the dress yet, but that's coming up, actually.
I just want to say, I love the way Linda Gibney plays these scenes, because somehow she just makes her eyes kind of gleam with malice, and it's really fun to watch her.
And I really feel like CC brought a lot of this on himself with the way he's treated Gina, so it's really hard to, think of Gina as the bad guy of this whole thing.
Well, and also, the way he kept kind of changing who was in, who was out, he's made an art over the years of playing different people against each other, but then it left everything just a big mess when he actually became vulnerable and incapacitated.
Mason tells Gina that Eden made a big mistake last week with that $1 million she lost, and that now maybe he can get Ted to vote in his favor. So we haven't seen Ted for a while. He's off looking for Lakin. Everyone seems to know she's in Lake Tahoe, was it? So he's probably there trying to get her back. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. We saw, though, remember, we did see him with Danny, and it was kind of a flash to the old Ted we saw, right at the beginning of the whole series, where it was him and Danny hanging out at the beach.
It's October, so theoretically he should have started school. So Lakin clearly has abandoned her first year of college, but maybe Ted actually has been going. So maybe that's making it more difficult for him to try and get Lakin to come back. Gina is making notes about how Eden's room is only 25 feet from Cece's room. This to add to the data about, that she was timing how long it would take the nurse to come when the equipment was unplugged. So she's planning something, obviously. She's got a big, complex plan. She thinks maybe Eden's dreams will help her figure this out, and so she asks Rosa about Eden's bad dreams. And as annoyed as Rosa is at being asked, and as much as she hates Gina, Rosa just spills everything about Eden's dreams and says, oh yes, she's wearing her favorite dress and pulling the plug on CC in her dreams. So, thanks, Rosa.
Yeah, yet another reason why I actually find Rosa to be one of the more challenging characters on this series.
So, it then transpires that Eden has asked Rosa to get rid of that dress. Gina manages to divert Rosa into another room, leaving the dress unattended, which gives her an opportunity to steal it. And she holds it over herself and says, not really my style, but it'll do. So that's what makes me think she's going to pretend to be Eden, and she'll need some witness to say, oh, we saw Eden skulking around Cece's room or something. I don't know. There's, not a lot of ways you could have a witness to, supposedly Eden skulking around the room without people saying, oh, but it's clearly Gina, because there's just that one hallway up there. Unless she's going to have Lionel looking into Cece's window with binoculars or something to try and frame him, I don't know. Or maybe she'll get some security cameras placed somewhere so that, she can walk past wearing the dress, but without, her face being visible or something. Like, I'm not quite sure how she's planning to frame Eden with that dress. And
Yeah, it would need very dim light. Maybe someone slightly, maybe a drunken mason. I don't know. Although Eden's his sister, it would have to be someone who was maybe a little bit drugged. I would think, or not
we've got
entirely
at least
alert.
one nurse will be on duty. Well, obviously she'll wait till there's only one, so there's not too many witnesses. But I guess the nurse is going to have to be the witness.
Yeah.
And it would make more drama for Mason if it was Mary. So I think that's what I'm thinking, is that somehow Mary will say, "Oh, Eden, it was Eden. I saw her," but somehow
It would have to be from the back. Gina and Eden are, I guess, sort of a similar height. They
Well, I
seem
mean,
to
I
be
guess
fairly
if
tall, both
I
of
guess
them.
if Mary came running up the stairs, because obviously she's going to do it when Mary's on her break. Mary came running up the stairs, and then Gina, dressed as Eden, was running away, towards where we always see the camera. Then Mary would see her from behind, but she would also have to somehow get past Eden's room, and also, if Eden came out of her room wearing a nightgown, it's seconds later, that would be weird, right? Because Mary would say, "Oh, didn't I just see you in a dress?" So, I'm not sure.
We'll have to wait and see how they do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've been watching Knots Landing. We've started the next season, and we actually haven't talked about the resolutions to all the cliffhangers from in May. We should do that at some point. But we've been watching Knots Landing season 4. We've had several episodes with Louise Sorel in them, because she's playing a publicist, I believe, for Valeen's book. So we've seen her quite a few times. This would have been about a year before Santa Barbara, I think, for her.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's about it for sightings. We've watched a lot of Barnaby Joneses, but there haven't been any Santa Barbara people in it lately. Not since that Robin Matson one.
Yeah, every once in a while you say, "Oh, that's someone," but it's not someone we've reached yet in our viewing of the
We
series.
do see people from other subs. We see Tony Geary, and we just saw, who did we just see yesterday? The one who played the recast of Diana Colville recently. I can't remember her name, because she was up from a soap I don't watch. So. Well, that's it for week 63, and we'll have 2 more baseball games next week, so we'll only have a 3-day week next week. So it'll be less work for us, but we still have to wait 2 weeks for the episode to air. So maybe I'll get ahead with my extras. And anything else?
I don't think so.
So we'll see if we see Ted next week, or if he's off. We'll see if Cece comes out of his coma just in time to stop Gina from framing Eden. And we'll see what Kirk manages to do with this new information he's gleaned about from Eden and from that conversation with Gina.
And I am expecting at some point we're going to see or meet the big bad who is behind,
after Dylan.
who's after Dylan.
I feel like that.
Not that I'm entirely caring what happens to Dylan, because he seems like a rather problematic person. Sort of the kind of person you wouldn't necessarily want in your own life, but I think whatever happens to him could have a lot of collateral damage to other people.
I don't know how he's going to meet any new people in Santa Barbara if he lives in that motel. So maybe Janice will sneak him into the Lockridge house, and then the Lockridge is on vacation. She might do that. So we might have a scene of Dylan encountering minks in the middle of the night, and she'll have a riding crop of some kind, probably, to ask him why he's in her home, and then Augusta and Lionel could come back and encounter him, and Warren, of course. So otherwise, he's just going to interact with Julia and Nick and Janice in his hotel room. Kelly, I guess, could show up with Nick one day.
Or, remember, we haven't talked about them for a while, but Brick and Amy are still floating around there somewhere.
Brick's probably in the hospital again after his fall, although...
Remember, he was cured, though.
Successful surgery, but still, they probably still had to take that piece of metal out now that it was in a safe space, and he's probably recovering from that. So next time we see him, he'll be doing jogging in place or something, having recovered. I mean, the town recovered from that earthquake pretty quickly. We haven't heard about it in a long time. So
And if this was a modern soap opera, Johnny would be 21.
Johnny, just back from law school. Although we do have a lot of lawyers on the show. All right, we will be back in 2 weeks after we watched episode 310 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Not only am I a bastard by birth, but I am a cold one by breeding. Oh, the answer to an Iron Maiden's prayers. Hey, who are you going to get to run this company around here now? What, you and Rosa?